Welcome to the Church Planters Experience. If you find value in these conversations, please share them with others.
All the way from Mexico.
Yeah, all the way from Mexico.
I've been kind of laying wait for you for a while because I knew you would come and go. So glad to actually be able to spend some time with you. Have had the privilege of enjoying your boys in our community, and
yeah, y'all have done a lot for my boys.
well, I have some big questions about your boys. So let's just dive right in. How do you raise boys to be independent at a really young age? I mean,
Yeah, so I guess it goes back to my upbringing. My dad never held me back. He pushed me forward, if anything. And so I decided to do that with my boys. So I would give them fairly large, give them a lot of responsibility at a young age. I would send them out, give them the pickup and send them out to town, which is 2 hours away. Or I'd send them out to our home area, which is 8 hours away, and give them a grocery list and a, shopping list and send them off.
and like how young?
The first time I left them drive the truck all by themselves, the oldest was probably 12. They were 2 hours from home.
Wow. So you sent a 12-year-old 2 hours from home to pick up groceries.
Well, that particular time, it was more like just taking the truck home.
Okay.
So they didn't do any shopping.
So
Yeah.
were you in an adjacent vehicle, or did you just send them home with the truck?
I think that particular time I had a ride in a small airplane. There was some other event going on and I needed to be somewhere and we needed to get the truck back. I don't remember the details, but anyway. But whatever the case, I would give them tasks that I thought they were able to handle, but it was going to be stretching for them.
So there has to be times when that just was a wipeout.
They've always done pretty well. One time I sent them to town and the differential went out in the vehicle. And we didn't have cell phone service. They had to find a mechanic. They spent several days getting the thing fixed. And yeah, they worked out.
So where were you in the meantime? I mean,
I was at home.
Were they able to call you and say,
No.
"Hey, we're not coming home tonight"?
No.
Wow. So what does that leave you like? I mean, as a father, you expect your sons to be home maybe later that day, and they just never show up.
Yeah.
And then they don't show up the next day. And they don't show up the next day.
I forget, it was maybe 2 days.
Wow.
So my goal is to train them for kingdom work. And if we're going to be, you know how the Army trains people, they put them through some rigorous training. And so, hey, kingdom work has to look the same.
Wow. So you were not really a helicopter parent.
No.
Wow.
No, I mean, I tried to do a lot of teaching, but then there also has to be times where they get to go out and put that in practice and see what they can do.
Wow. So, they told me some stories, but I didn't realize it was quite that extreme. I mean, so you must also be, you must also spend a lot of time praying.
I do spend a lot of time praying.
If you're going to turn 12, 13-year-olds loose in the back sticks of Mexico and not know when they're going to come back. So were you worried?
No, I actually wasn't worried. Now, just to help you understand, for you, the back sticks of Mexico looks like a wild place. We'd been living in that place for 10 or 12 years. at least.
Okay.
So this was home. And yes, it was 4 hours or so from home. But because of the back roads and everything, the distance wasn't so far. It's a small town. It wasn't so wild, as it were.
I mean, but there's still cartel wandering around, and
There is that, yeah.
like, wow, yeah, just, and what, like how did you prepare them before that? Like, what's the like, so you don't just turn a 12-year-old loose with the pickup because you think that he can probably make it home. So you obviously are working up to this from a pretty young age.
Yeah, so I would say my vision was to teach them, and a lot of that teaching was working with them, but then I'm not able to be there all the time, and so then I send them out to do tasks that I think they can do on their own. So there has to be a balance of working with them and then also sending them out to work on their own.
So you've lived in Mexico since when?
Since January of 98.
Since January of 98.
27 years.
So you've been there 27 years. So your children would have been born in Mexico.
They were all born in Mexico.
27 years. So how did you decide to go to Mexico? Like what made you decide to go to Mexico? How did that?
Yeah, so the Lord took me through some some difficult things in my life, and there were a number of things. One was just a lot of business pressure and relationship issues and things, and the Lord used all of that to get my attention. And I had felt, I guess, for quite a few years that someday I want to be involved in spreading the gospel where people don't have as many resources. So there are a lot of people, here in Pennsylvania that obviously are not Christians, but there are bookstores where they can buy a Bible. There are churches. And some of those people have never had exposure to Christianity. There is no Bible in their language. They don't know how to read. They don't know where they can even find a Christian. Maybe not even know there is such a thing. And I felt like God laid that on my heart. And so I talked to my parents, and my mother recommended Mexico. So I had
Now, how old were you then?
at that point I was 21.
Okay.
And so I had a contact who I knew had spent some time in Mexico. So I talked to him. He provided me some contact information in Mexico, and the doors just started opening up. And before I realized what was happening, I was in Mexico.
Wow. At 21.
So by the time I left, I just turned 22.
So 22 years old, single,
Single.
and headed to Mexico.
That's right.
So, wow. What kind of church were you a part of when you made that?
At that point, I was part of Shippensburg Christian Fellowship.
Okay. So you were at Shippensburg, and you're 21 years old, and hey, let's go to Mexico.
That's right.
And you went with somebody or by yourself? Or?
Went all by myself.
And what do you mean, like all by yourself? Like you just picked a town in Mexico and went to that?
I mean, I traveled by myself.
Okay.
But the invitation that finally was, where I was going to head to was an invitation to tutor or teach the children of a missionary family.
Oh, okay.
So they offered that I could teach their children. And so I traveled down alone. I lived with them for the next year and a half. And then I got married.
Did you go, like when you went to Mexico, did you think you're going to go for 6 months or a school term or for 2 years? Or did you say, I'm going to Mexico and not coming back?
I didn't really know what was going to happen, but I wanted to stick it out for at least 1 year.
Okay.
And it was interesting. On the way down, all of a sudden I was like, hey, wait a minute, a whole year. And somehow I just knew there was no marriage opportunities in Mexico.
Okay. Okay.
For whatever reason.
So you were making a bigger sacrifice than you thought.
Well, I counted the cost, and on the way down, I was like, wow, what am I getting into? A whole year without even thinking about dating or marriage or anything. And I was like, Lord, I surrender, I surrender, I surrender. And I really did surrender, and I really gave it up. And the next evening was the first time I saw my future wife. Now, it wasn't love at first sight or anything like that, but yeah, I saw her the next day.
Wow. So the day after you ended up in Mexico, or the day after you really wrestled with this?
So I wrestled with that on the way down. I guess that evening I crossed the border, and the next evening was prayer meeting,
Okay.
Wednesday evening, and that's where I saw her for the first time.
So there was a small church there at that time.
There was a very, very small mission beginning to form, but it wasn't really established as a church.
And then, like, kind of take me through that. Like, what happened? Like, how did you got married at that little mission church?
That's right. Yeah. So the family that was spearheading that was a family who had been part of the Kleine Gemeinde German Mennonite colony there, and they had a heart to reach the national Mexican people. And so they moved from the colony just a short distance into a Mexican village. And then they had a little work in 2 Mexican villages. And so I became part of that.
So the German Mennonites, Russian Mennonites, is that kind of the same?
Well, Americans call them Russian Mennonites. They don't call themselves that. They call themselves Plattdeutsch people, or Low German.
Plattdeutsch.
Low German
Yeah.
people, yeah.
So that is not typical of them to do mission.
Among national Mexicans, yeah. There's been some more, but no, it wouldn't be very common.
Okay. And then you is that still somewhat of the roots of the church group that you're with now?
So yeah, we still consider that to be our home church. So I spent 10 and a half years in that area. And then in 2008, as a family, we moved 8 hours drive south of there to work among the Tarahumara people, which would be an American Indian or an indigenous tribal people. We had the privilege of bringing the gospel to people that never had heard the gospel.
Wow. And that is in the canyons of Mexico.
That's in what they call the Copper Canyon.
Okay. Because so the Plattdeutsch people live more in the farmland, is that right?
That's right.
And then the little town that you initially went to, is that like a part of, is that still kind of in the plains or in the farmland?
Yeah, that would be in the plateau area there.
So when you moved in 2008, when you moved out of that area, you moved into the Copper Canyon
Copper
area,
Canyon.
which is a little bit more remote,
That's right.
or maybe a lot more remote.
Yeah.
And what's like were the living standards different from the town that you first lived at?
Yeah. So the area that I first moved into, considering the Mexican average, it would be above average economically, and some of that would have to do with the German Mennonite influence and their part of the economy and all of that. You know, it affects everything, and it's only 4 hours from the border. That may impact things also, but yeah, it would be above the Mexican average. So then from there we went to the Copper Canyon. Yeah, it was a pretty big change.
So how old were your children or your oldest children when you moved
Yeah, so the oldest was 8.
down? Okay. So the oldest was 8 when you moved down to the
Copper Canyon.
Copper Canyon area, and your living standard changed significantly.
Drastically, yeah.
And so just describe that a little bit. Like what is...
Yeah, so so the first thing that happened was, this is a tribal area, and these people have always known all the people they know, sort of.
Okay.
And so they're really suspicious of outsiders. So they wouldn't rent me a place. And I asked a lot of people if I could rent a house or, what I could do. Nope, no one would rent me a place. So there was our initial contact there was a believer who had been born there, but he no longer lived there. And so he found me a little level spot in a field, and I built a tent out of square tubing and like a tarp like you'd use for a semi. It's heavy stuff, but it's still a tent. And I built actually 2 tents. One was kind of our bedroom and the other was our kitchen. And we lived in those tents for 3.5 months.
Okay.
That was how we got our foot in the door.
And did you eventually build a house there, or was that just...
Yeah,
So you built the house?
I built a house.
Okay.
Yeah, eventually.
Same place, or was that not a place?
So we initially set up in a little field there, and then somebody wanted to plant beans in the field.
Okay.
And he's like, "You can put your tent down by my house." And I was like, I just didn't feel good about that. And I guess the Lord just gave me this thought. There are officials in these towns that are in charge of the land issues. And I was like, I'm going to him. So I went to him and I just explained my situation. And he offered a little piece of land. Well, he offered two options. He's like, you can pick one of these 2. And so I went and looked at him and I said, I like that one. He said, put your tent up. And so we lived there for a number of, I don't know, it was probably maybe 2.5 months. And then this incredible cyclone went through and blew our kitchen over, bent the frame on our bedroom, and just absolutely terrified us.
Whoa.
Yeah.
You were in there.
We were in there. And so my son Jordan was 4 years old at the time. He says that an angel stood by his bed that night and told him to not be afraid. And so, it was bad if an angel came and talked to him.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, living in a tent for 3.5 years.
Months.
3.5 months. Okay. So then you moved that tent in the...
So then I asked permission to build a house. The official gave me permission, but not everyone in town was good with that. So there was some opposition. There were times where I actually was, concerned about violence and things like that, but nothing ever happened. God protected us. And we were so desperate to get out of that tent. And I was getting the walls up and everything, and I realized my wife's birthday's coming up. And I said, honey, we're going to move on your birthday. And so the morning of her birthday, we both woke up at, I think it was 4 to 4:30, something like that, had our devotions. By about 5 o'clock, we started moving. We didn't have that much stuff, obviously. And the house was, a half a stone's throw away. By the time it was light, we were pretty much done. And I just took I didn't have a roof on the house yet. So I took the whole tent tarp and put that on for the roof. And then eventually, finished it. But by the time the sun hit us, we were moved. The tent was down.
So, wow. So what kind of house? Like...
It was adobe and stone. The stone was like back in the bank, we dug out, and the adobes would have not held up to the moisture, and so I used stone there and then adobe.
So like stone, like dry stack, or did you concrete it in, or
I mixed up mud and put between the stones.
like mud as in
Just
like
normal,
dirt,
just
dirt mud?
Yeah, yeah.
Not like concrete mud.
Not mortar, no.
Okay. Because in the masonry business, we call that stuff.
That's true.
We
That's
call
true.
it mud, so I wasn't
Yeah.
sure if you meant. So you mixed up mud and put it in between the stones, and then you put adobe on top of that.
Yeah.
And how, like, did you build that? Like, did you do the adobe work yourself?
My wife and I did. We made a lot of adobes between the two of us. We worked really hard. And then there were some youth boys from the church that came back and actually helped me to lay up the walls. And then there were some American youth boys that went down and helped quite a bit with the roof and different things.
So how big of a house was it?
I believe the interior measurements were 14 feet by 22 feet.
And that's the whole footprint of the house. Like,
Right.
so did you, like, is it still standing?
It is still standing. We did add on to it quite a bit. Yeah, it's quite a bit bigger now. And that's where the ABT team is living.
In that house?
In that house.
So did you build like, is the rest of it built with adobe also? It's...
Let's see. The back walls, I guess I made them out of concrete blocks where I dug back into the bank to make it bigger. Yeah, I laid up concrete blocks back there. And then we actually added an upstairs room, and that was framed up, and we put like steel siding and steel roof and everything.
So how long did you live in the little 14 by 20 some?
It didn't take long till I added a little room on the back, just a little bedroom. We there were a number of American youth wanted to come down and, like, serve a term or something, and so that became their bedroom. As a family, we pretty much lived in that 14 by 22 room about 5 years.
Wow. So one room?
We had a curtain, but yeah, it was one room with just a curtain.
Wow. And did you dig a well, or do you have rural water, or how'd that work?
Yeah, so the indigenous people in that town have access to spring water, and they string up like half-inch flexible pipes and string them down the mountain.
Okay.
And it was a struggle. Again, the people didn't trust us, and they struggle enough to get water for their own use, let alone sharing it with a foreigner they don't really trust. So they would disconnect my pipes and all kinds of stuff, and I'd go up in the middle of the night and try to, get some water. And but now the ABT team, they've got all those bugs ironed out, and the neighbors are happy and willingly share water. So it's working.
So you have running water, gravity flow?
At that house, there's gravity flow spring water.
Wow. But it took a little bit to get that.
It took about, well, so we lived there 5 years, and then we moved away to the next town north, and we spent about 5 years there. And so there's about 5 years where we were just kind of in and out a little bit, but not really living there. And then now the ABT team, things have even taken a further step, with relationships and, water availability and things like that.
Wow. So why did you move? Why did you move to another town?
Why we moved, yeah. So in the first town there, we had a small group of believers that were meeting regularly, and I thought that we had planted a church, and there was an invitation in the next town north to come over and teach them. So I thought we were going to move over there and start the second church, which we did. And the believers in the first town moved away to find work. I'm not sure what all the motives were, what all the reasons were. There's obviously spiritual forces, but they moved away, and a lot of them have not done so well. And so now we are in the process of, well, I say we as in our family along with the ABT team, trying to plant a church again. But in the second village that we moved to, there's a church going there.
And you live in that second village now?
Well, now we live about halfway between.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how far did you say that the villages are apart?
In a straight line, it might be 5 or 6 miles.
Okay. But by road, that's probably an hour or so?
By road, that would be 2.5 hours.
Wow. 5 or 6 miles, but 2.5 hours away.
Yeah.
Wow. So it's almost faster to walk.
It's about a 3-hour hike.
Okay. Wow. Must be rugged.
It is rugged. The terrain actually is very, very similar to the Grand Canyon.
Okay. So how do people live in the Grand Canyon? Like, I mean,
How do they raise food, you're saying?
well, I'm just picturing the Grand Canyon and
Right.
thinking about people trying to live
Right.
in a place like that.
Yeah, so it's challenging. So obviously you need a level place. Probably the biggest concern is water. And a lot of the people have a flexible black pipe that they string up to their house, but not everyone has that luxury. Some people haul their water on their back or with a donkey or something. They'll haul their water. The next consideration is food. And so they've historically been subsistence farmers, trying to raise food for their own consumption. They just are not able to raise enough food, so they do migrant work. They'll go out and work with vegetable harvests and things like that, and then come back home and buy food at the store.
So it works better for them to go work and just make cash and
Right.
use cash to buy food
Right.
because they can't raise it.
Yeah.
And that little black pipe doesn't bring enough water to really make any difference.
Well, what happens is in the dry season, those springs produce a very small amount of water, and then there's the population has grown quite a bit, and so it's barely enough for each neighbor to have enough to drink and take a bath and some things like that. No, it really does not reach for irrigation.
So during the dry season, it's not enough.
It's not enough. Yeah.
But is there how long is the dry season?
Well, so our main rainy season is about 4 months, but then we'll get some rain in the winter typically. But then the really, really dry season would be March, April, May, and the first part of June. About 4 months, it gets really dry.
4 months of dry.
Yeah.
So that would be tough.
Yeah.
And do people live in villages, or are they scattered out, or how do they?
Well, typically the Tarahumaras lived really scattered out. But worldwide there's what they call urbanization. People want to move into urban centers to have access to the store, schooling, cell phone service, all that stuff.
So they're doing the same.
They're doing the same.
Well, I would have thought that indigenous people would have lived maybe remotely, but in clusters. But
there were some clusters, and there were also some just kind of scattered.
really, so just out by themselves.
Yeah. But then they would, a lot of times, then their children would start to live. They would set up housekeeping, grow up and start housekeeping close by.
Okay.
And so a lot of those houses would end up having a little cluster eventually.
So how did you decide? I mean, obviously you said that so the first time you went from the original place that you lived, you went out. Was that just how did you decide to go?
Yeah, good question. So some of the brothers in the church had a burden for the indigenous people. And so we were traveling across the mountain. We had a little mission we were trying to start, and there was a Tarahumara family that started coming to our little mission church, and we made friends with them, and they invited us.
Okay.
So there was this invitation on one side, plus some of the church brothers, with a burden for the indigenous people. Personally, I went through some really rough years, and I just felt a need to have some changes in my life. And so it wasn't so much that I felt a burden to go to that place, but I knew I needed a change.
Okay. So wait a minute. I'm recognizing a pattern here.
Yeah.
So, like, was the change good?
Definitely.
Like in retrospect, was
definitely.
it? It was the thing to do.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So let me guess. This when you went for the second village, then you were going through some rough times again.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
So, yeah, what was the reason for the like when you thought? Was it just that you thought you had a church established and you were ready to go? Not just beat that horse to death and go to the next one and kind of remote pastor or something like that. Was that the plan, or was?
Yeah. So when we went over to the second village, I'm sure there were some rough, things we went through, but more than that, it was just that there was an invitation. And my vision was always to establish local leadership. And so I thought we had it to a point where I could start coaching them into leadership, which looking back, I guess they weren't ready for that.
So a little bit of the idea of letting your 12-year-old drive the truck, kind of the same principle
I guess.
In a church.
Yeah, I guess.
Let that, but they didn't do quite so well, but probably because they hadn't been. It's quite different to have someone that you were with for what, 3, 4 years, 5 years?
About 5 years. Yeah.
Versus somebody that you were with for 12 years.
And that could be one factor. Just recently, I've been hearing through the grapevine that it's possible that one of the factors in his whole backsliding may have been a root of bitterness.
Okay. So the devil may have been at work more than you realized.
Yeah.
How many children do you have?
We have 7 children.
And how many of those are with you in Mexico?
Well, there's 3 full-time, and then sometimes 4.
Your youngest is how old?
The youngest is 6.
Okay. So you have 3 children at home, and then you have 4 children abroad.
I have 3 children at home, 3 children abroad, and one that's kind of
that goes back and forth.
Yeah.
Okay. Doesn't that isn't that tough to have your children scattered? Thousands of miles away, and they're
It is on one hand, but when I got married and started having a family, that whole concept, that whole idea was very much, I wrestled with the whole thing. And I felt like I came to a place of peace with this understanding that God wanted me to raise a family and send them out. The Bible talks about as arrows in the hands of a mighty man. Our children are similar to that. What do we do with our arrows? We send them, we shoot them. And that's been my goal ever since our children were young, is to send them eventually. And so I guess you could say I was maybe psychologically prepared for that, or spiritually prepared in some ways. But yet, of course, we miss our children. Yeah.
So what are you thinking for the future, and in Mexico, like what's so you've been at the first place. You were at the first place for
10.5 years.
10.5 years. Second place for 5 years. Third place for 5 years.
5 years.
What's next?
And now 7 years at the farm.
Okay.
Yeah. What's next? Yeah, that's a good question. So the Lord has been opening some interesting doors. One of the most recent doors that God has opened is an opportunity to help some national Mexican brothers in establishing an orphanage. And so that's not connected with the indigenous people. That's in a large city. So I'm not really planning on moving there, but I'm trying to facilitate, make connections and things. And so the project is in the middle of the construction process, and we're excited about it. And the Lord has also opened doors with sort of a consulting role in other places. And we have what we call a Disciplehip School. We do some of that in Mexico and also some of that in Pennsylvania. And our goal is to facilitate and mobilize and teach, inspire the next generation towards kingdom work, at home or abroad.
What does that look like in Mexico?
So we had been doing a 2-week, I guess you could call it a Bible school or something, but focused on kingdom work. We sort of split it in half, kind of 3 days one place and the rest of it another place. And now I think the focus is not so much trying to train people as inspire people.
And what's the difference between, I mean, like, what are you, like, what's the nuance between training and inspiring?
Right. So inspiring is basically just, casting a vision, whereas training gets more into the technical details of, okay, so how do we do this?
Well, where are the people coming from? Like in Mexico, are people coming down from the States to Mexico, or are you?
No, the Mexican events there, they would be coming largely from the cities, I guess.
And they're coming out, and you're just trying to inspire them towards
kingdom work.
And like, what made you decide to switch from the kind of the training to inspiration? Like, what was the idea there?
So I felt like 2 weeks just wasn't enough time to really train. And so many of these people are coming in there without any concept, any background of missions or church planting, whether locally or anywhere else. And I feel like they're not ready for training until they first get a vision for the whole thing.
Okay. So you're bringing in people that really are kind of don't even know what the opportunities are.
That's
almost.
Right. It's incredible, but so many of God's people have not been given a vision for, expansion, church planting, spreading the gospel, doing anything for the lost, really. And I think part of that is because pastors tend to focus on gathering people, and the concept of sending people out often doesn't cross the minds of pastors. And so I personally feel like my gifting is not pastoring. My gifting is more the pioneer type of kingdom work.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's really interesting that you say that, because I've like that's been the way I've experienced the world myself, is that I see people, like most people look for bringing together and
Right.
and establish, and we need that. Like we need establishers, but often the establishers and the pioneers kind of tend to have some difficulty relating.
It tends to happen.
And that causes, and since most people are establishers and very few people are pioneers, it's pretty quickly the pioneers kind of get put on the back burner. So
yeah, so I've had some of that in my own experience where, I was young and zealous, and I didn't realize that God was calling me into a life of pioneering, but it was kind of in there. And I was, stretching my wings and trying to figure out how to find my way. And there were people in my life who I would say were my, spiritual leaders in some sense. And they completely misunderstood what was going on, and they tried hard to squelch that, which made some painful bumps in my life. And I don't say that to say negative things about those people. It's just the Lord used all of that to awaken in me kind of this concept of, okay, yeah, we need pastors and we need pioneers. Let's see if we can work together in a symbiotic relationship.
yeah, that's the hard part, is actually getting both of us to, like I definitely have moments when I'm like, okay, like I think we're established enough. But then if you look at, there are a lot of good things come from establishment, and that most people benefit a lot from it.
We need that. Yeah, we do.
You talk about doing discipleship training in Pennsylvania. So what does that look different than Mexico? Is it still inspiration or mostly discipleship, or?
It's some of both. So one thing I'm trying to be careful with is, so in my own experience, I went and did CrossCultural church planting. And I'm aware that God doesn't call everyone into CrossCultural church planting. And so I'm trying to be sensitive to that. I want to inspire everyone, whether they're, somehow reaching out to their next door neighbor or whether they're traveling around the globe. Everyone needs to somehow get out of their comfort zone and help other people.
And so that's kind of, that's where you're taking people in your training, inspiration, whatever that is, in Pennsylvania. That's more the kind of the focus of just.
So there's a variety of teaching that goes on. So I'm one of the teachers, and there's also a lot of teaching on just simply, personal preparation, getting grounded in the scriptures, learning how to study the scriptures, inductive Bible studies, and things like that, which, all of that is foundational, really.
So when you look at, when you take you being 21 years old and wanting to go to Mexico, and you said your mom actually suggested Mexico. So was this something generational, like that your parents would have had a vision that you would have picked up, or was this just something at the moment, or how would your parents have, like what did your parents do to establish this in you, or was this in spite of what your parents?
Right. Yeah, so I'm not quite sure what all the spiritual journey would have been in my parents' lives, but my parents moved to Paraguay when I was 6 months old.
Okay.
And so I lived basically the first 7 years of my life in Paraguay. And what took them to Paraguay, I'm not sure what all the reasons were.
Now, where in Paraguay?
It would have been the Florida colony.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's with the fellowship group.
Right.
So that was also kind of centered around Plattdeutsch Russian Mennonite?
There would have been some not so far away. Yeah.
So, did that experience obviously shaped you a lot? I mean, in your first
I
7.
was young, but those are formative years, so yeah, probably.
Wow. And were they just going for a term, or did they?
When they moved down, I think they considered it permanent, but my mom's health wasn't good, and there were a number of factors, and finally they decided to just move back to Pennsylvania.
Does Florida still exist? I mean, like the
It
college?
is. It is still in
wasn't-
existence. Yeah.
Not sure if that one was still going or not.
Yeah.
Wow. So Florida, Paraguay till you were 7,
That's right.
and then you came back to Pennsylvania, and
Yeah. So then in '83 we moved back to Pennsylvania. We would have been part of the Fellowship Church for a number of years, then eventually moved to Shippensburg.
about how old were you when your parents moved to Shippensburg?
We moved to Shippensburg when I was 17.
17. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So my parents were always very focused on, sincere Christianity. They had a lot of books, a lot of really, how would I say, the old classics, written by heroes of the faith, and they read extensively, and so religion was always the number one topic in our home.
Okay. So like something you talked about around the kitchen table
Yeah.
kind of thing. Well, where did you place in the family? I mean, you had brothers and sisters?
Yeah. So my parents weren't able to have children for the first number of years of their marriage, and so they ended up adopting Luke, who has Down syndrome, and so he was the oldest. And then when he was 5, then I was born.
Okay.
And then after me is my brother John, and then Salome.
So there were 3 of you.
3
4 of you.
biological.
So, and you're doing a lot of reading. Your brothers and sisters also do a lot of reading? Or was that like a family thing, or was it just kind of your parents and some of you caught it and some of you didn't?
Yeah, I'm not sure how much my siblings read.
Okay. What are some, like, when you think about books of your childhood, early, you like, what are some books that you kind of come to mind?
Right. Yeah. So, so my mother went through a severe depression at one point, and I believe that one of the books that really helped her a lot was the book called The Calvary Road by Roy Hession. It's a real well-known classic. So in my own life, some of the books that have impacted me would be, just before I went to Mexico, I read Hudson Taylor's Spiritual Secret.
Okay.
It's like a 2-volume biography. And then once I was in Mexico, I read, someone gave me a copy of Roland Allen's book, Missionary Methods, St. Paul's or Ours. That left a big impact. I've enjoyed reading Andrew Murray's books. Tozer to a certain extent. I would put Andrew Murray kind of near the top, I guess, of my favorite authors.
So Andrew Murray, what does he write?
His focus is on the deeper Christian life. In other words, when I say deeper, I guess what I'm referring to, and I think what he would refer to is an absolute surrender, first of all, and then a dependence on a continual inflow of God's presence, as opposed to struggling along in our own strength.
And like, does he write books?
Andrew Murray?
Yeah. Or is it more articles?
Andrew Murray, he lived like 300 years ago.
Oh, okay.
Or probably 200.
So he wasn't posting on Twitter or anything?
No, it wasn't on Twitter. No, these would be books. Yeah.
And like, can you think of any titles? Like,
Let's see. Andrew Murray wrote The Full Blessing of Pentecost. What else did he write?
So 300 years ago.
With Christ in the School of Prayer is a really good one.
With Christ in the School of Prayer.
Yeah.
So 300 years ago, 1700s? 1800s?
Probably 200. I'm not actually sure. Somewhere between 150 to 200 probably is about when he lived. He lived in South Africa. He was of Dutch descent and lived in, or wait a minute, maybe not Dutch. Maybe it was Scottish. I'm not sure, but yeah, something European.
Interesting. Now, that's not an author that I've been familiar with. So.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of stuff that inspired you to
step out and do something. Yeah.
But now you're looking at a little bit more of a little bit more, I guess, a little bit of a deviation from your German descent. We tend to be pretty pragmatic and practical and straightforward, not looking at much of the charismatic side. Like a lot of indigenous cultures have a very strong charismatic side. How does that play into your view of church planting or church, the way a church works?
So the indigenous people, prior to coming to Christ, their worldview and religion would be called animism, animistic people. So it's based on superstitious beliefs, demon worship really is what it boils down to. And so the indigenous people, they've lived under fear for generations because of demonic powers. And a lot of missionaries have gone in and just made fun of, their superstitions and their witchcraft and all this stuff. I'm convinced that demonic powers are real. There are demons. And these people know that there are demons. They've seen them. They've, felt them. They've experienced this stuff. And so I don't make fun of their animistic beliefs, but I'm a firm believer in the power of God to overcome all those things. And so I teach them how to resist the devil and he will flee from you, pray against demonic powers, to not be afraid of demonic powers. And our God is big and he's powerful. And we've seen so many miracles. I should have written them down, but I just haven't done that. But God has done miracles of healing, just a number of things that God has done. And you use the word charismatic. I'm not quite sure how you're applying that. There's a movement nowadays called the charismatic movement. We also talk about a bubbly personality as having a lot of charisma. The words kind of are related, but the way they're applied is not the same. And so I'm not quite sure exactly what you're referring to there.
My point of reference there is you're probably not a cessationalist.
No.
Which a lot of people will say that that maybe not officially a cessationalist or not officially believe that the gifts have ceased, but in a pragmatic sense, it's like, okay, nothing's ever going to happen. We've never seen anything happen. But maybe the reason that we've never seen anything happen is because we haven't been there. We've been, busy somewhere, on our farm tucked away in Pennsylvania that doesn't have any demons to cast out.
Right. So I have a friend that lives in India. He's a native Indian. And I visited him at one point, spent 10 days with him. And I said, brother, what's your perspective on the topic of miracles? He said, well, if all you want to do is stay within the four walls of your church, he said, you probably won't see a lot of miracles. But this brother in particular is focused on taking the gospel to the people in India who have never heard the gospel. He said, if you will take the gospel to people that have never heard, he said, you will see all the miracles you want to see. And I think there's a lot of truth in that statement.
So you're saying you've personally seen those miracles happening with the people, with these unreached people, and is that significantly different than what you would have seen in the first, more established area that you were in?
I would say so, yeah.
So it's not just you personally; it's more the people that you're interacting with.
So soon after we were married, the Lord used some people in my life to convince me that I need to earnestly seek the Lord. And part of that was getting up in the morning and having at least one solid hour of personal devotions. And I would say that decision is probably one of the bigger milestones in my life. But along with that was just an insatiable desire to know God, to communicate with God, to feel His presence. And the Lord took me through a lot of breaking and surrender. So I think those two go together, the surrender and the and then the filling of God's presence. And so I really began this journey. So I would say I was on that journey for probably 7 or 8 years before I got to the mountains. You know, this journey of just really earnestly seeking the Lord, fasting, sort of longer periods of fasting and seeking the Lord. And I wanted to know God. And one of the concerns that people from our background often have is, well, Jesus said we shouldn't be seeking after miracles. An evil and adulterous generation seeketh after a sign, and no sign shall be given them except the sign of the prophet Jonah. All right, so we should not be running after miracles. But in Mark 16, Jesus said, these signs shall follow them that believe. So we don't follow the miracles follow us.
So when you had these 6 or 7 years of preparation before you actually went out, and
Right.
In the meantime, in this time of preparation that you're talking about, you were still not necessarily living in the U.S. You were living in Mexico with a small mission church. When you're surrounded by other people that are missionary minded, if you want to put it that way, is there something of a cumulative effect, like where nobody's holding back there's nobody really holding back, everybody's just, I shouldn't say trying to outdo each other, but you have more of a everybody pushing each other to greater heights?
Yeah, definitely. So the term that comes to my mind is a think tank.
Okay.
So a lot of outstanding things that have happened in this world, whether good or evil, have come out of a concentrated environment. You know, whether it's outstanding politicians or dictators or inventors, or even on the spiritual side, you know, the same way. Your more outstanding individuals have usually come out of a concentrated environment. And one of the terms that people often use is a think tank. You get a number of people together and they just really, get each other going. Okay, so in God's kingdom, we don't have a think tank.
Right.
But we can have an environment it's kind of like a greenhouse, you know, where you're surrounded by this environment, and as opposed to a plant that's growing alone on a mountaintop. It gets blasted and it's just a different environment. And so I would say in a lot of ways there was a greenhouse environment, especially for a few years there. There was a pretty significant, you know, really a fervency among the group.
I've called that artist attic, where if you really want to be an artist, you know, what better place to be an artist than to rent the attic above Michelangelo's studio, like
right, yeah,
and that's something I think is really important when it comes to church planting, you know, those kind of efforts, is that if you don't have somebody around you that is interested or you know, that cares, it's really hard. It's very, very difficult to even get off the ground, because
yeah,
if everybody else is making fun of you and trying to build an empire, makes it really difficult.
right.
But at the same time, I guess there's a lot of Daniels out there too that are probably.
So I've actually found myself in more of that environment the last few years, in some ways, in our years in the mountains there. There's been a lot of times where I just don't find a lot of support, and I'm alone. And then it's just dig your heels in and just give it all you got. But it's a lot harder.
So when you in those, so you are alone, pretty much.
Yeah.
And in those times when you are alone and you don't have, I mean, you obviously probably have people that are kind of a phone call away, maybe, but that's not the same. Your nearest church people are probably your disciples.
Yeah.
Like when you look at kind of peers, how far do you have to go? A couple hours?
Yeah, well, so, you know, we have our home church 8 hours away. But I guess where I'm at in life, I really find myself with a need in my life of brothers who are older than myself, or at least close to my age, with an ability to assess my situation and speak into my life.
Yeah.
And so I've been very proactive in the last number of years, the last few years, in surrounding myself with a group of brothers that I can go to.
So you're really looking at needing that 4 or 5 brothers that are just deeply committed.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I recently saw that. You need 4 or 5 brothers that are just willing to challenge you or to, you know, help make a decision or to, if there's something going on that shouldn't be, they're willing to just grab you and get you out of there, like the kind of that level of commitment, not which brings you kind of back to the Army military idea of a unit of, ideally you would have some of those that were close around you and not states or countries away, but I guess with technology it makes it a lot easier.
It does, yeah.
How does that work for your family? I know you have, your older children are kind of here and there. Some of them are here and some of them are
there.
I don't know where there is actually. But like, how does that work for your family to be mostly alone for the last 10 years? Or maybe more?
17 years.
17 years.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been challenging in some ways. So I'll give my wife a lot of credit. She reads a lot of stories to the children, spends hours every day homeschooling them and all of that. I'm certainly not a perfect parent, but we try. And then we're also very thankful to those people who have invested into their children, who can be friends with my children. And so my brother John is definitely towards the top of that list. He has a beautiful family, and his children have provided a lot of friendship for my children.
So, were they able to come down to Mexico occasionally, or ever? Or
Yeah, they were down. So the boys were down, I think, towards the beginning of the year, and then here in the middle of the year, the rest of them went down.
oh wow!
So yeah,
they're pretty committed. They're not.
yeah, they were down and spent time with us.
Wow. And so, your wife, what was her background?
Her background was Kleingemeinde, Plotich, Low
Okay.
German.
And is the lifestyle you're living now similar to what she grew up with, or is it totally different than?
So the lifestyle that we lived soon after we were married, it changed in a lot of ways quite a bit, because we moved into a Mexican village, and so it changed somewhat. And then moving into the mountains, yeah, just completely
Totally different.
Totally, yeah.
How far away does her family live from?
Her family lives there where our home church is.
Okay.
They're part of that.
So her family is not terribly far, 6 hours, 7 hours away.
8 hours.
8 hours, wow. Okay, well, that's getting terribly far.
Right.
Not close enough for her to just run home. And like, what has it been when you're talking about moving to the mountains? Is she saying, hey, it sounds like a great idea, let's go? Or is she saying like, hang on a minute?
Yeah, she's been a brave woman. She really has. So she went there willingly, very willingly. So when we got to the mountains, one of the first things that happened was we ran into this language barrier. And I was not really prepared for the whole thing. I'd never took any linguistic training, and all these, I see a lot of people go out with linguistic awareness and training, and I didn't have any of that. But my wife has incredible linguistic abilities, and she just dove right into language learning, and that's been an incredible blessing.
So she's been able to learn the language, and
she's not 100% fluent, but she's fluent enough that she can converse with the women.
And is this something that, like, did y'all talk about when you got married, before you got married, or any of that? Did you talk about any of this kind of ideas, or was it just something that you came to later?
Yeah, that's been quite a few years ago. So
I mean, you're saying like you were 21 when you
Right.
are thinking of moving to Mexico. Like, had you kind of moved there and said, hey, like my vision is to do something more than just be here, or was that?
So at that point, I was pretty young, and I didn't really have my future figured out. I was taking one day at a time. But I had a heart for missions, and she had read books as a child, missionary biographies and things like that, and it all seemed exciting to her, and she had a heart for missions. But we didn't really specifically, I don't think we did a lot of talking about going to an unreached area.
So it was new to both of you in a way, and the thought.
In a way it was. The other thing that I guess happened was, prior to going to the mountains, to the indigenous people, I had a heart to reach people that weren't, exposed to Christianity. But I guess the whole concept of never reached people I wasn't really aware of that whole concept until we had lived in the mountains a while. And I was like, okay, now, wow, wait a minute here. These people never had the opportunity, and there's this language thing. and this whole thing, I started becoming aware of what was happening and what we were involved in. And then we started coming into contact with sources like Ethnos 360 and of course ABT and different sources like that that also fed into that. And over the years I became aware of the difference between reaching people in an area where there are resources versus reaching people in a completely never reached area.
So what is the big difference there? Like, I mean, what in your mind, what are you seeing as, are people more open? Are they less open? Is it harder to crack that shell because they've never heard, or is it easier because they've not been contaminated with some other, their belief hasn't been kind of distorted by something else?
Yeah, I think those are all, those factors all vary from place to place. But I think that more than the receptiveness is our responsibility. I think that as God's people, we have a responsibility towards people who have never heard. And part of that is because they do not have the opportunity. They do not have a Bible in their language. They couldn't read it if there was one. They have no contact with any Christian anywhere. So the most likely scenario is they're going to be born, live their whole life, and die without ever having known a Christian, and maybe even having known that there is such a thing as Christianity.
Wow. That's hard to believe that's even possible in the world.
That's unbelievable, but that's a responsibility that God's people have.
So when you say like totally unreached, yet these people do migrant labor, they have modern technology to some degree. They're probably carrying cell phones. Is that normal or is that odd?
So the Tarahumara people in particular, I like to say they're going from the Stone Age to the Space Age in about one generation.
Oh, wow.
And so there are elderly people that I've had in my home that can't figure out how to turn a doorknob. Like that's, technology to them. And then I'm sending messages on WhatsApp to their grandchildren.
Oh, wow. So how, like the old people, like how old are the old people? Like do you have...
The life expectancy would be lower than here, but there are some that get up to probably 70 or 80.
Okay, so they're not super old. But maybe some cultures they might be 100, or they might say they're 100. It's hard to tell which is. But there's a lot of drinking. Is that right?
There's a lot of drunkenness and drug addiction.
And that kind of shortens lifespan.
It does, yeah.
And as that goes on across all generations, it doesn't matter how, like, it's not like that wasn't it. Like the drunkenness would probably have always been kind of an Indian culture thing, but the drugs, is that still?
I think that the affluency that has increased has also brought more drunkenness. So in other words, the let's say if you go back 50 years, yeah, they had their, made their homemade beer and had their beer parties, but I don't have accurate information, but my guess is that there was enough poverty that it kind of kept it a little bit at bay. Whereas the more money you get, the more beer you can get too.
Right.
The drugs, I don't think that traditionally they had drugs. I don't really know of any drugs that they would have had. So the first thing that came in was marijuana, which, back then that was a drug. Nowadays it's it's recreation.
Yeah.
But nowadays, there's all these chemical-based drugs, methamphetamine and all that kind of stuff. It's just devastating. And we personally have seen so many young people that start down that track, and once they get hooked on meth, their life expectancy, I think, is about 2 years.
Yeah, it's terrible stuff. So meth is prevalent down there.
Well, when they go out to work, yeah.
Wow. Which I guess it is a pretty simple. I mean, simple ingredients kind of drug. So, but with some very terrible consequences.
Right.
So is that the main kind of drug? Would that be the main drug, or is there?
Well, I don't know what all's out
You're
there.
obviously not doing it. So you're not.
Yeah, I don't know what all's out there, but that's the one that I think has kind of really come in recently and gets talked about. And but yeah, there's
Well, regionally, it seems like that there are drugs that kind of catch on, and really,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
it's a disease that spreads through the community, and
it is.
it doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
You know, fentanyl is something that's, with the wealthier Americans, but
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know if that's where we lived in Missouri. It was meth. It was meth. It was
Mm-hmm.
it was kind of
Yeah,
the drug of the culture was meth.
right, yeah.
They didn't do weed, and they didn't do
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
fentanyl. I mean, like that wasn't what you heard about. Like all the drug
Right.
raids were meth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Wow, broken world.
it is a broken world.
And that makes it exponentially more difficult
Mm-hmm.
when you are trying to reach people and they're high or drunk.
Yeah, it does. It does create a barrier. So when people are drunk, I just simply let them go and hope they'll come back a different day. I don't try to, present the gospel to drunk people. Um, the drugs typically have been more of a problem when they go out, and then some of them come back and just use milder drugs like weed and things like that. But yeah, there are people that their minds are pretty well ruined with all that stuff, and it's really sad.
So have you been able to bring any of those people that, like any of the, deep drunkenness or drugs, or like, have any of those people managed to break free, or are those still kind of an unreached people group, if you want to put it that way?
Right. I would say most of our church people at one point were okay. So were the alcoholics? They drank. At what point do you become an alcoholic? But yeah, they all drank. A number of them did drugs, and most of the other sins that you read about in the Bible. And so there's a miracle.
Yeah.
When you see someone
Yeah.
that at one point was involved in witchcraft, immorality, and drugs and alcohol, leave all of that and become transformed. That's a miracle.
So are they able to, if you do bring somebody out of that, are they able to, like, how effective are they in going back?
Mm-hmm.
Being fluent in the language and culture, like,
Mm-hmm.
does that give them any advantage over you?
Mm-hmm. Potentially it would.
I mean, it seems like it would, but
Right. The thing that's been difficult for them is to really get motivated, and so often they feel like I'm the teacher, they're not, and so it's my job to go spread the gospel.
okay.
And so we're trying to take it, step by step, give them maybe like Bible pictures and prepare them, teach them how to share the gospel, or at least share the stories, and then motivate them. And I think there's been some of that. The one older brother, he's brought a lot, like almost everyone else, he's brought them to church.
Okay.
And so there is some of that, yeah.
So you're trying to get them to understand the importance of them
Mm-hmm.
being the hands and feet of the gospel.
That's right.
And not just you.
Mm-hmm.
So they do have a little bit of you're the missionary, you ought to do the work.
So they've actually been a lot more effective than I have in actually bringing people to church the first time.
Okay.
And I really tried to, encourage them and push them, and some have been faithful. In church, I have this vision that the church service needs to be participatory. Everyone, well, not everyone, but yeah, everyone at some point needs to share. So no one gets the privilege of just sitting in a corner and never saying anything. We all have to share. We all have to participate. And definitely there are quite a few of the men who are learning to teach or expound a Bible passage or something like that. Our biggest problem there is that they really don't understand Spanish too well. And so we need the scriptures in their language. And that's what the ABT team is preparing to do.
And who is Ethan Wagner?
That would be David Sensenig. He would be the New Testament Bible translator.
Okay.
I mean, he hasn't started, but he's working on language acquisition at this point.
So you have one.
Mm-hmm. And then my daughter is translating Bible stories, which is not the Bible text, but it's Bible stories. She's got a lot of Bible stories translated.
Wow. So how does that work? Like, do they read it in their language then, or are they like, oh, we don't know how to read our own language?
Up to this point, they have not read those stories. So my daughter Juanita has read the stories
To them.
to them, and that is the next step now, is to teach them to read them.
So they can't read their own language.
No.
Nobody?
There are other areas that have sort of a different dialect where there's people that, they read fluently in their language. But in our particular village, I don't think there's anyone.
Wow. So you have a whole group of people that can't read the language that is their native tongue.
That's right.
But they all know Spanish to some degree.
No, they don't all know Spanish. I would say 95% of the men know some Spanish.
Wow.
And maybe, it depends, but like our people group, there's probably at least 50% of the women that hardly know any Spanish.
Well, how does a society function without any written language?
You're used to America.
Yeah, I know I'm just an American, so
Just go travel around the world. Yeah.
that just sounds unbelievable that you could actually function without a written language. Like,
now there's a percentage of the men that can read and write, and so they have like the government has put in place, how would I say, like a mayor type of a person, a secretary, treasurer, and they function and they read and write. There's a secretary that registers the babies and it gives them a birth certificate and all that kind of stuff. And so there is that, but then there's also a huge segment of the population that can't read or write.
so are those people? I mean, I don't know how Mexico's government is, but are they like us where everybody has a social security number or a registration of some sort?
Yeah.
So how do they register these people that don't read or write?
Yeah, so historically, those people would come in and hopefully each of the parents would have a birth certificate, and the secretary takes that and registers the child.
Okay.
But there were an awful lot of mistakes made. And some of those secretaries had a nightmare trying to sort out all the incorrect information and all of that. Nowadays, it's all online. And so you just go in the computer and pull up the information and you got it there.
So they have done it. The Mexican government has done a good job of actually documenting who the parents are, so that even if they can't read or write, they can say who they are, and that takes care of.
And so now they all come in with their, some sort of registration, documentation of some sort. Show that you pull it up in the system. There it is. Yeah.
So what's the motivation for them doing that? Like, if you're a tribal community, like, why would you care if you had a birth certificate for your child?
So I guess this is probably worldwide, but the governments have found ways of giving them pensions for all sorts of things.
Okay.
And so if you depend on a monthly stipend, that's a lot of motivation.
That is a lot of motivation. Yeah. Yeah, that helps a lot. So you come to the U.S. once a year, twice a year?
Once or twice, yeah.
Is that like, why do you come up here? Like, what's?
So I have my Disciplehip School. That's one motivation, and then I have my family here, and also I have been proactive in connecting with a group of peers that I feel like can speak into my life and give, I can consult with.
Yeah. So when you come up, like this time, did you come up for a meeting or for?
Yeah, so this particular trip, I had quite a few things
So
that all stacked
you just
up.
kind of make a list and then you just.
So we have it. So the Discipleship School students a year ago had a reunion, and it was a big blessing. And so they decided to do it again. So this time it's taking place in South Dakota.
A reunion in South
And so
Dakota.
I decided to swing by Pennsylvania on the way to South Dakota.
Okay.
Once I'm to the border, U.S. border, I'm halfway to anywhere.
Okay. So that's a halfway point.
I say that in that,
Well, you be able to cross in and all that stuff.
Right.
Yeah. Wow. So you're on the way to South Dakota for a reunion.
Yeah. So we call it the Upward Way Discipleship School, UWDS. So it's a UWDS reunion.
And what does it have to do with South Dakota?
One of the teachers lives there.
Okay. And who's that?
That would be Thaddeus Pate.
Oh yeah, I know Thaddeus. So he lives in South Dakota and said, "Hey, y'all come my way this time."
That's right. Yeah.
So South Dakota would be a little more central to the U.S. than what Pennsylvania is.
Yeah. However, most of our students would be from Eastern United States, but hey, who doesn't want to go out west and
Go
see the country?
So, do you expect a good portion of your students to show up?
Probably half of them.
That's a long way to South Dakota.
It is.
I mean, it's not as far as Mexico, but
Yeah.
well, actually, maybe it is.
No, it'd be about half as far.
I say distance-wise, I'm not sure. Triangulate that.
Yeah.
Your boys were talking about going to Wyoming on the way to Mexico a while back, and I was like, that's not on the way. So I looked it up on the GPS, and it kind of is,
Yeah.
which is just doesn't make sense with the way I look at the map.
Right.
But
Right.
yeah, it isn't that far out of the way. Yeah, it's great. And in your discipleship school, you have old people, young people. Like, who are you?
So the biggest percentage have been singles, youth, but we've also had a number of young married individuals or couples, but it's open to anyone.
So in the U.S., when you're trying to inspire young people or young couples, it seems like there are some that are really inspired, but I've heard people say things like young people aren't equipped. So don't send the young people. You need to train them first. Which training, by the time you're done with your training, they're no longer young people.
Right.
So, but young people are the ones that usually have the flexibility, the desire to go somewhere, the motivation.
Right.
Once you have several children, you're kind of start establishing in life. It gets more and more difficult. I tell people that every year after you're 40, the difficulty of doing something doubles.
Okay.
I mean, like something new.
Right.
Because you just somehow, once you hit that stability, you just become more and more stable.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
which
right.
has it can be good, but it can also be really bad.
Yeah.
So how do you inspire somebody? Like, how do you get somebody? I mean, what are you doing to inspire young people? First, to get them to come. Second, to get them off the bench.
Right.
I mean, you're not bringing people in that are just stick in the mud. I mean, obviously, they're not coming to your discipleship program unless they are somewhat interested already.
Right. So not all of them are even considering cross-cultural missions. Some are coming because their friends went last year and they enjoyed it.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a segment of that. But as far as the question of how to inspire young people or anyone, there's an old quote that says that facts are the fingers of God. And what the
Wait.
person meant by that,
Facts are the fingers of God.
facts are the fingers of God.
Okay.
And what the person meant was, just picture yourself not knowing anything about the needs of the world. And someone comes along and tells you, you know what, there's this tribe, and here are the needs. They're living, in all of these problems, and they don't have the scriptures, and they've never heard of Christianity, and they begin to tell you all the facts. Guess what? You feel this like squeeze in your heart. And I think that's one of the big reasons that not more people go out to the really needy areas of the world. They simply do not know.
So you're saying it's mostly lack of knowledge.
I would say that's one huge factor. Another huge factor, I think, is that church leaders, I think, have been largely, for the most part, have been a little weak in teaching their people to go out and tackle the darkness.
And what do you think? Like, what do you think is the? I guess we talked about that a little bit about just the stability thing, but what do you think is the reason why church leaders aren't more inspired, if you want to put it that way?
Well, I think that men who end up becoming pastors a lot of time have the gift of pastoring, and so they tend to be focused on gathering people, and they focus on shepherding those people, and that's needful, it's necessary. And the people that would have the gifting for more of a pioneer work, some of them have been squelched. Some of them have gotten into business. They've invested their entrepreneurial skills into business instead of into kingdom work. Some are way out in the ends of the earth and don't come home very often. But I think there's a need for people that have gone out and worked in cross-cultural missions to come back then and share the situations that are out there. Okay. And I think that pastors should be proactive in teaching their people about creating an awareness of the world's needs, I guess. So one example of a pastor who did that is Charles Spurgeon. Charles Spurgeon never went out into any kind of cross-cultural missions that I know of, but he inspired a whole generation of kingdom workers, young men who rose up and went out to the ends of the earth.
By bringing those people in, or by just by his teaching? Like what?
So Mr. Spurgeon, the story goes that at some point when he was early in his ministry, a young man came to the Lord from the community, and he was a young man that was just full of zeal, and he didn't have any teaching. He had just got converted. And one day someone comes to Mr. Spurgeon and says, "Hey, do you know this young man is out there evangelizing on the street?" And Spurgeon knew this young man was not ready to be a teacher. And instead of shutting him down, he says, "You know what? Let's bring that young man in here and train him." And so he brought him in, and he started bringing more young men in. And out of that, he started this little school, or I don't know what you call it. I guess a school, or maybe it's kind of a sort of a version of a seminary, but it wasn't a seminary. And he would train young men, and he had a small group of them, and he would run one group through and then another, and he continued that work the rest of his life. And somewhere I read that at the end of his life, he thought that work was probably more important than his pastoral work.
Yeah, well.
So,
but he was a pastor type person.
He was a pastor. He definitely, that was his gifting, was pastoring. And he didn't try to do anything else, but he inspired those young men and trained them and sent them.
Wow, that's great. I mean, that's really what we need more of. Is
we really do.
Is it's kind of the more of the thought that even though I can't go, I send you.
That's right.
That's
right.
and I love to see that. Like I see that. I do see that often, but would love to see it more.
Right.
That's
right.
really good.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that in America we need awareness. I think we need teaching, Bible teaching on. The Bible teaches us to go. There's a verse in Proverbs. I wish I could quote it word for word, but it says something along these lines that deliver those who are drawn unto death, help those who are heading towards slaughter. But if you say, I didn't know anything about it, it says, will not the God who judges everyone see and know? And so, in other words, what it's really saying is, at the end of our life, if we have done nothing and we say, oh, I didn't know that there were unreached people, I didn't realize that there were people without Bibles, God's not going to let you off so easily. We are responsible to inform ourselves, or I should say, as the pastors are responsible to inform their members or parents, their children, of the needs around the world. So, I've been hearing stories of the young people in the Anabaptist circles, and there just seems to be a boredom in so many of them, and they want something exciting. And I hear stories of young people, watching horror movies and things like that to try to drum up some excitement. Young people typically are willing to give their life for something. Sounds strange, but they are. And I think every human being, and young people in particular, have this desire within them to be part of something that's bigger than themselves, part of something that's worth dying for, a cause that's going to go on past my lifetime. And that's why you have boys joining mafia groups and cartels and armies and gangs and corporations and whatever there is around the world. But the kingdom of God is the only cause that's going to go not only past my lifetime, but into eternity. And I think we need to do all we can to raise up a generation of young people who will go to the ends of the earth, go into dangerous places, and they are willing to do risky things if it's a cause that's going to win and it's going to go past their lifetime.
Yeah, that is, well said. That is definitely what, inspiration to go beyond, like, growing up, in my youth, I know, like, we would sit around and talk about how, like, we don't want to just, like, what if we just get married and have children and do nothing? Like, that'd be just, like, we thought that would be the awfulest fate. But here we are, and probably most of my generation has done exactly that.
Yeah.
And it, like, all those great things that we thought we might do back then, very few of us have done any of that.
Yeah.
So there is there's the inspiration part, but then there's also a big reason why none of those young people did anything is because there was no opportunity. I shouldn't say there was no opportunity, because there was no clear road to an opportunity.
That's right.
Most of the things that they would have loved to do or would have wanted to do were either they themselves didn't have the courage to try them, or they were discouraged by the culture of the group, or discouraged by the leadership of the group, or maybe discouraged by their parents for good reason. I don't know what all the reasons, but pretty much young people, it's pretty easy to say, well, they dumb idea, don't try that.
Right. Yeah. So so I'm a guy, and so I watch what the guys are getting involved in, and I think a lot of young boys have gotten into cars, pickups, engines, and power, you hit the pedal and you spin the wheels and burn rubber and, you know, create a cloud of black smoke and whatever all. There's something in a man that just longs to have power. But whenever Jesus went back, ascended to heaven, he said to his disciples, he said, wait in the city of Jerusalem until you are endued with power from on high. And then a few verses later there in Acts chapter 1, he says, it is not up to you to know the times or the seasons, but you shall receive power after that the Holy Ghost has come upon you, and you shall be witnesses to me in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. And one of the reasons that we can go is because there is a power available, but it's absolutely necessary to have that power. And if you represent a version of Christianity that has no power, first of all, there's no reason to go. And next of all, you will be a failure.
Well, you'll be destroyed.
Be destroyed.
You get shredded on the first inning.
Yeah. And so our version of Christianity better include power.
It's so difficult to, like you were saying earlier about believing that all the miracles have ended and all this stuff. But then yet seeing them when you get there, I think that's another reason that we shrink back from the edge, is because we've seen too many people. I've seen a lot of people that have been very enthusiastic about spreading the gospel, sharing the gospel, and they've been kind of their home congregation would have kind of looked at them and said, hey, you know what, you're not ready. And they kind of retaliate against that and just say, no, we're going to go do it. And then very quickly, most of them seem like they become a mission field themselves. So it's kind of like this. They had the vision, but they had no power for some reason.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there is something with teaching young men in particular. I mean, I think young men and women, but I'm going to say young men in particular.
Right.
How to live that, how to live with that power, and how to access that power, and how to be there.
Yeah.
So how do you get the power? I mean,
yeah, that's the
40 days on the mountaintop.
Good place to start. Yeah, good place to start. So I just want to make a comment in passing about what you said there about our motivation for going out into kingdom work. If our motivation is reactionary, you know, like they're not doing it and so I'm going to do it. I watched people go down that track, and they're an easy target for the enemy. Our motivation has to come out of a genuine love for the Lord. Well, first of all, having received God's love, and then a reciprocal love where we love the Lord with all our mind, soul, and strength, and then by extension, our neighbor as ourselves. That has to be the underlying motivation. All right, now to the question of how to access God's power. So, I remember as a young man desiring to be a man of God. I read stories of the heroes of the faith, and in my mind, I'm like, that's what I want. But I didn't know what button to push to get there. I had no idea how to get there. And I believe that God saw my heart and led me in that direction. And I'm not going to profess to be an authority on the topic, excuse me, but I'm going to share a few things I feel like God has led me into. So as I mentioned earlier, morning devotions. So at one point, I was challenged by someone else that I should have my personal devotions in the morning. And I scoffed at the idea, and I said, "Yeah, right. The morning's more holy than the evening," or But God got a hold of me and convicted me that I need to use the first few moments of my day for personal devotions between me and God, and really do it seriously. And so I read some literature on George Mueller's devotional method. And so what he would do is he would get up in the morning, he would say a short prayer asking for God's direction. He would read a chapter in the New Testament, and then he would read a portion in the Old Testament, and then he would meditate on those passages, and then slowly transition into prayer. And I think that's beautiful. I think that's a great pattern for anyone. So that's definitely one foundational point in coming into a deeper Christian life, where we experience God and so on. And then there's the whole thing of fasting. So I wasn't really taught that, but I started fasting at one point, and then I kind of lost the vision and quit fasting. And then at some point I was really challenged by a preacher that I should fast. And so I started doing it on a much more serious level. And I am convinced that it definitely is effective. It's effective in breaking the power of my flesh, weakens the flesh, weakens me. And as I pray in faith, quote the promises of God, believe God, I'm replaced with Him. And that's really what we need, is for me to be out of the way and God to be in control.
So when you talk about fasting, you said you had done some fasting, then you quit. Why did you quit?
Well, so when I moved to Mexico, I was told by an individual that wasn't necessary.
The fasting was not necessary, which I guess necessary depending on what you're trying to accomplish.
I guess.
I mean, so, and then you said you got back into more of a fasting mindset. So what like in your first period of fasting, like what were you doing? Long periods of fasting, short periods of fasting, like what kind of?
Yeah, so it took me a little bit to, it's like anything else. It takes practice and experience. So I still remember I made up my mind I was going to fast, I don't remember, 3 days or something like that. And I got halfway, a day and a half into it, and I just gave up. And I was just overwhelmed. But as time went on, the Lord worked in my heart, and I got, I don't know, more mature or more determined. I'm not sure what happened, but I, went way beyond that. I'm not here to talk about how long I fasted,
Right,
but I think it's an offering we give to the Lord. And so people want to get technical. Okay, so how do you do it? How many days? Do you drink water? Do you drink coffee? All this kind of stuff. And I say, well, it's an offering to God. It's
No,
also,
wait, you said it's an offering to God?
well, I think in a sense it's an offering to God, but it's also a way of weakening my flesh. So in the Old Testament, people would make a vow, and I wouldn't vow to fast, but I would set apart a time and kind of like, God, here I am during this time. But it's something, I offer my time to God, my fasting time, I offer it to God. I think it's an offering to God. And I think God accepts that and receives me and my offering and everything. But to turn it into something legalistic, I think kind of defeats the purpose.
Well, so I grew up in a culture that we fasted if there was, something big happening in church. Like we'd say, okay, well, for maybe getting ready to put church discipline on somebody, excommunicate them or somebody, something like that, and be like, okay, let's spend this day in fasting before we do that.
Right.
But other than that, it was pretty much, I won't say it was unheard of, but It was not talked about.
Right.
So I don't know what was happening. And I was always I grew up under that. If there wasn't any teaching on fasting, it was about how you shouldn't let anybody else know that you are fasting.
Okay.
So that kind of leaves you with no idea if anybody else is doing it or not, or kind of like, or a very vague sense of what might be happening. I suspect that was probably taken a little bit further than what Jesus intended when he said, "Don't let others know that you're fasting."
Right.
Because I think there's probably more. If everybody knows that you're fasting, that's maybe not necessarily a great. I mean, it can become an end in itself.
It can.
But at the same time, if we don't talk about it at all, then people get the impression that it's not important or not
right.
something that matters, or even technique or how to do it, or how do you how long or when or where, or all of those things that really become difficult for people to wrap their minds around, like especially if you're not familiar or you come from a culture that doesn't talk about fasting. Then how do you know?
Exactly.
I mean,
exactly.
How do you know if you're fasting? Are you skipping one meal? Are you skipping 3? Are you going 2 days, 7 days? I've heard actually in Rwanda that the government outlawed fasting past 30 days.
Wow.
So it's illegal to fast more than 30 days. I guess they had some people dying. But that sounds extreme to me.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think what Jesus was addressing there was, he talks about the Pharisees who would go out into public and make a long face and whatever all they would do to draw attention to themselves, and that's what he was pushing back on. But I've been part of experiences where a whole church group set apart a certain time. Obviously, like the some of the mothers weren't included or whatever,
Right.
but at least all the men and whoever else wanted to join the effort, we would set apart a certain number of days, and we would fast, and we would be united in intercession for a certain need or something like that. And I feel like that was an incredible blessing. And in fact, there's a lot of stories down through history of groups that did something similar to that, and God poured out incredible blessing. And so I think that we have to take it all in context and understand it. Like you say, if there's never anything talked about or any teaching, how do we know what we should do? How does the next generation learn?
And I guess one of the things that with fasting is that I wonder about is like the power dynamic there. Is it related to power, to spiritual power? Like, is there a relationship there?
So one of the passages where Jesus talked about fasting is the story there where the disciples tried to cast a demon out and they were not able. And Jesus said, "This kind comes not out but by prayer and fasting." And we, kind of like to sort of slide around that one, but it's there. He said it's not going to come out except by prayer and fasting. So when you go into an area like where the tribal areas and so on, they're just full of witchcraft. Maybe I'm not specifically trying to cast a demon out of a demon-possessed person, but hey, the whole area is just like saturated with witchcraft. Why not pray and fast about it? And I think there's been a lot of missionaries that have done that and have incredible testimonies of how God has broken demonic powers through all of that, strongholds and just all sorts of things. So yeah, I am very convinced that fasting is effective. One comment I want to make on that. I've heard the comment that fasting is not designed to twist God's arm.
Yeah, I was going to bring that one up. But
and definitely that's true. Fasting is not designed to twist God's arm. So in my own personal experience. When I have fasted, I get weak. I just sit there and I'm like, I just don't have any strength. And what did John the Baptist say? I must decrease. After several days of fasting, yeah, I decrease. Seriously.
You really do decrease.
I decrease. But then I need to pray and seek Him and fill myself with the scriptures and just really, come into God's presence, and then He must increase,
Wow. Yeah, well, I suppose you need to move on to your next project here soon, but it's been good talking to you.
Yeah. Thanks for inviting me.
You bet. Anything else you would like to say as we wrap it up?
God is good, and I am so happy to be involved in His kingdom. It's just an incredible opportunity to be involved as one of God's ambassadors in this world.
Well, Elisha Byler, thanks for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
You bet.
Thank you for listening. If you find value in these conversations, please share them with others. Now go set the world on fire.